like to take a little time to talk about the hair because it's so critical for the shape of the head, and it's an opportunity for artists to flatter and adapt profiles, but we have to know that the hair is mainly about masses and not about lines. And so the typical tendency is, I think, many times is to get a lot of lines, and really it's about the shapes and the volumes of the hair. So I'm going to start out with the hairline itself. If we're lucky enough to have a hairline in the front, is something like this. Of course, it changes so drastically in most of us, but there is a common average, and that is to go back around the frontal eminence. It leads forward, down and through the temporal area, and then it changes directions quite a bit right here and manages to sort of echo the shape of the brow, and then back into what we call sideburns, let's say, and would end right there. Now, as it goes up around the ear, and you can see this with people with short haircuts, and it's become fashionable, I'd say, in the last couple of years to have very interesting haircuts where people are shaving or cropping the sides very, very closely, and then maybe having a large volume up on the top or on the side somewhere. And so you'll be able to see that the hair doesn't grow in certain areas. For example, as it comes down here, there's an area from here to the ear that I'll call, for lack of a better word, the no hair zone, because no hair grows in this area. And so you notice this either on a male with a very short haircut or on a woman who has her hair pulled up into a bun or a twist or some kind of a grouping, and you'll see where that hair ends. And so it continues down about to there, and we're going to come in from this side, and again, that is the no hair zone. From the side, echoing the brow, back, down to the sideburn, and over, and this area, which follows the temporal, up into the frontal. And when someone has a receding hairline, we will say, okay, well, that hairline now, as age comes along, comes back to there and reveals a lot more of the skull. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with the hairline is the direction of the hair. And again, most of us have a pattern that the hair follows, and it starts somewhere in the back on one side or the other, and it's called a whorl, and some people call it a calic. And basically it's the beginning of, like a sunburst, that does this sort of thing. And it goes all the way around, and as it grows out, it comes down in this direction, but typically it grows toward the front until it gets to here. And at this point, the hair comes back this way. And you can see this because it's very important that when we change volumes on a short hair, it's not going to make too much difference. But someone with long hair, depending on whether it's pulled back or just clipped very, very short, you'll notice that the hair grows in this direction. And the direction of the hair is critical. So I'm going to go back up to this hairline again and make it a nice youthful hairline. And here is where, again, because of this whorl, the hair grows forward. And that's one of the reasons when someone pulls their hair back, it creates sort of a pompadour look, is because it's turning the hair in the direction it doesn't want to go, so it makes it go up. The exception to that would be if someone has a calic in the front, which is not uncommon at all, and that calic would start here, let's say, and the direction of the hair would swing up like that, because that's the way it grows. So now I think I'm going to start out with a sort of a male haircut, which will give me the opportunity to talk about very short and cropped hair, and also some long areas too, because those will create the masses. And the masses are what create the profiles, is what we're really getting to here, is how the profile of the hair is going to change the shape of the head, or of any area of the head, from the front or from the side. So I'm going to start talking about hair masses, and a thing that I call a reference to the skull. And a reference to the skull simply means that when I take a mass of clay and I put it here, for example, and I'm going to take another mass, and so right where that part is what I'm calling a reference to the skull. That means it goes back down to the skull, and it tells the viewer that this mass isn't just a helmet, it's something that's literally growing from the skull. So I've been seeing a lot of haircuts lately that are very long on the top and very cropped here on the side. And to get the effect of that, first of all, it's volume. But when it comes to the hairline, we have to make a distinction between where there is and is not hair. So one thing, if we have to do any lines, we want to make sure that those are lines that indicate a correct direction of the hair, the growth of the hair. And secondly, we might indicate just a little more depth in through there so that you can see where the hairline begins. A lot of times we have to do things with sculpture to make it read, to catch a little bit of a highlight or a shadow so that you can see where something begins or ends. But as far as the masses, it's determined by the length of the hair, the rhythm of the hair, meaning how much curl, how much wave is in the hair. Some people have very tight ringlet kind of curves, and if you pulled that, it would go into S-curves, and that's what I'm talking about, rhythms. And those shapes and masses create an aspect of the profile. So right in through here, I'm going to bring this mass up and create sort of like a pompadour. And I might just have a few little lines indicating which direction that hair is coming from. So I'm going to roll this over, and this is my reference to the skull, the part. This is going to be the side where, before I go into that, I think this major mass right now is feeling a little solid, a little heavy, so I can do a few things to break that up and to give it a little more interest also. I'll just separate a part of that mass. And one more time. Okay, now what I want to suggest is that this is a very closely cropped part of the hair. So the hair here is shorter, and typically on a men's haircut, it's a graduated. The hair is longer here, and as it comes down, you get shorter, shorter, shorter until it's almost nothing at this point. So what we can do is break up the edge. For one thing, that creates immediately a sense that this is hair and there's something happening. Now, we don't want to just keep repeating that over and over or it would get boring. We just have to do it a few places. The same as here. We don't want it to depend on line. We want it to depend on form with just a few clues. And now here, I'm going to start to, maybe I could almost call it like fish scaling, or make shorter groups because the hair is getting shorter as it comes down. And then I could just hit the edges a little bit and until I get down to that area. And this is beginning to get a little androgynous looking because I keep going back and forth between male and female features and shapes and bones and hairstyles. But I want to talk a little bit about if this hair is a bit longer, because that'll give me the opportunity to talk about how the wave or the hair undulates under certain circumstances because of the curl. So I think I'll just use this pompadour as an example of that. This is one long group. There is a rhythm here, rolls around. Down. I might just, a few lines, punctuate that. And then for some interest, I could break this up a little bit and have one tendril coming down and possibly touching into the skull. And now I'm going to come back and I think maybe on this side I'll do something different just to give you a different idea. That was a very short grouping over there, and so I'll use this side to demonstrate a little longer. Now if this were a long hairstyle, for instance like a French twist or a ponytail, there would be what I might call an origin and insertion, and the origin would be the beginning right here at the hairline, and the insertion would be where it is cinched in the back. And that creates a couple of things. It will straighten out the wave a little bit. It will also give it a sense of tension, and it will also create a little gravity, which is one word that I haven't used so far, but I think I will now, because the gravity is what makes the hair, when it gets long enough, always come back or drape or hang. And so if this is a long hairstyle, it can't pick up too much weight when it gets close to the skull because it hasn't had a chance to accumulate that much volume. But as it comes back, it does accumulate volume. And in this case, I'm going to make it attach to a point where this would be some kind of a knot or a twist or a bun. And if that were to happen, as this comes down, some of this hair, if it's a full thick head of hair and long enough, gravity will affect it and it will drop down, and then it will get pulled up into that grouping there. And notice that I'm not putting anything in what I'm calling the no hair zone right in through here. And then I can bring some volume over there, and I can do this. I can use a couple lines, and I will sometimes just use them in my planning, and then I'll get rid of them afterwards. And another thing that can make hair interesting is to show that everything isn't doing the same thing. This could be coming up here. Now I would take an opportunity to make some of this hair come out from behind that group, and that creates a little change that makes for a very believable kind of quality, because what we're looking for is, in art, is to improve on nature if we can and make normal things even a little more interesting. And so if we can change these planes a little bit around, that will help in the process. And now, depending on the length of this hair, if this were very long, it might just roll under in a bun. It could be imploding if it was tied up and some of this hair came out from the middle and over this way. And this, almost like a plume, it's now coming out and rolling around. Every once in a while I change tools, because what happens is when I use this tool, you see it's just the same thing, but once it gets wet, the clay sticks to it quite a bit, and I have to keep scraping it off. So it's nice to go to a dry tool, and that way, see, it won't stick quite as much. But anyway, this plume now is developing, and I'm going to turn it in different directions just to get some nice variation. And I could just roll that completely around my finger and make it come back to the skull again. So that would be another, where this hair is being cinched, that again is also a reference to the skull. And I left a little bald spot on the top there. I think I'll fill that in now. And I'm going to take this, and now that I've turned this into a long hairstyle, I think I'll take this S-curve and make a little bit more out of it. And bringing that hair, you want to bring either the hair into the skin or the skin into the hair. Either way, the main thing is that you don't have a line of demarcation so that it looks like a wig was sitting on there. It has to blend in a little more. And in long hair, on the long hair side, I'm going to drop it a little bit right here so that it comes over the ear a little bit, and that will make it a little more believable. so I'm starting to really have fun here. But I think I've told you pretty much what I wanted to talk about with the masses, the groups, the rhythms. This is a rough block-in of it. I would love to keep developing this, but I think this is a good place to stop. I'm going to start with a sketch again and show you this, by the way, on men, hair that grows from this far down is considered to be actually beard hair. That's why when we lose our hair on the top, we don't lose that lovely fringe that goes around. And the direction of the hair is typically coming this way. It never, for example, goes up or straight back. It always comes down in this fashion. And this hair is a little longer. Typically on a man's haircut, it gets shorter and shorter as it comes down. Now, having said that, there's an area, and I'm, for lack of a better word, going to call it a no-hair zone, where hair does not grow. And that is from this point to the ear. There's an area here where nothing grows. And the same happens on the skull in the back. The hair grows here, but not in this area behind the ear. So from the front, the hairline comes down, and this sort of almost echoes the eyebrow. You can see the eyebrow drops back, and this is almost at the same angle and down. Now, as this hair continues, the same thing happens with the beard. There is an area where the hair does not grow, right in between here and the ear. And so it continues down like this, and this hair, beard hair as well, continues to grow in this fashion. Down. Now I'm going to just talk a little bit about this hair. Same with the mustache. The hair doesn't grow up in this area. It starts right about here, and again, it's growing down this way. And on some men, there is an open spot here where the hair doesn't grow in between the lip and the beard. Now, as the hair gets longer, it creates, when we have this short stubble, it doesn't create much of a shape, but once this hair gets long enough, it begins to come out a little farther, and it really does begin to create a shape. So it comes out, and depending on the length of it, it actually alters the profile now. And the same thing with the beard. It comes out in this fashion, and it creates a new and bigger profile. So I'm going to do this coming down, and let's do just a slight. Okay, so there is the no hair zone right in through there. The beard is going to come down, and then many times there is an area between the lip and the chin. And I could just almost indicate this as a dark area. But I do want to emphasize that you really have to take note of the direction of the hair, whether you're doing the eyebrows or the beard, because if, for example, you start to make the hairs come down or going this way, it's just not going to be believable. So again, this hair is a wonderful way to actually correct things. That's why Any hairdresser will tell you, if you have a thin face, you're probably going to want to wear your hair wide. If you have a weak chin, you're going to want to grow a little bit of a beard to cover that or to augment it. So I think I'm going to, at this point, go over and demonstrate on the three-dimensional head. So here is, and I can talk about this no hair zone, and that's right about where it is. So when you're doing a portrait, and if you have somebody with short hair, you don't want to make that hair growing over here. It simply just doesn't happen. And what does happen is, starting somewhere in the back, in some cases it starts on one side, some on the other, sometimes right in the middle, the hair starts as a whorl, it's called, and it goes around almost like a sunburst, like this. And you can, if you look at somebody with a really short haircut, you can see this. And it all goes out in that direction. And depending on whether it's short or long hair, it just continues down in this direction, except in this front area here. Now, I'm going to put some volume on here, because this is what happens when hair, even short hair, grows to a certain length. It begins to pick up a volume. And when we do hair, we don't want to have to be dependent on drawing a million lines. We want the hair to read as sculpture and not as a drawing on a three-dimensional object. So what we have to do is we have to make it seem like the hair is coming out of the skin. And when it comes out, it creates a little bit of a volume, even the short hair. So the hair, what we'll do is we'll pull the hair into the skin, or we could do it the other way around. We could pull the skin into the hair. The effect is pretty much the same. We don't want to depend on the lines. We want to rely actually on the form. And you can see that picks up a little bit of a highlight there when it changes plane. And so that's what tells us that this is a volume and it is hair. So just continue on down. Here is again the no hair zone between that area and the ear. So this continues to, now typically this hair is much shorter, and so this can be done with short little choppy strokes and not too much volume. And the hair, and this varies on different men. Sometimes the hair comes very high up in the cheek, and other times it doesn't start until down here. So there's a range in this area, but generally speaking, that's the area of the beard, and again, that is the direction of the hair. Now, when we come around to the mustache starts right about here. The hair does not go all the way up into the nasolabial fold. It just starts, so if you're doing a stubble, you just do some little short lines, and depending on how long it is, you may actually add a little volume to that. So let's turn this into first a very short stubble, and then we'll turn it into a full-blown mustache. It comes right around the corner of the mouth. And it typically starts around here, and this is that area sometimes where the hair doesn't grow, right in through here, or sometimes it's just thinner. And so when we're placing a mustache, we just need a change of plane, but sometimes by breaking the long edge with a few things like that, it can really create a hair-like quality. Just a few, just breaking that surface up just a little bit. And so see, we don't really need a bunch of lines to do that. So now I'm going to I think continue on down and turn this into to a full beard. Maybe we'll make it kind of a Shakespearean beard, or a musketeer's beard. And there are so many wonderful possibilities. As I'm getting clay from the back underneath here, it's because it's the same consistency as this, which is dried out. So it's a little drier than the clay that's in the bag, and I want to make sure that I'm adding the same consistency. So now, many times the hair has a little bit of a curve to it. So just by making S-curves, you can create that. And what we're looking for is a way to break up this shape and create some smaller masses. And that makes for a much more interesting interpretation of hair, because it creates more shadows. It says something about a few things. It says something about the length of the hair, it says something about the thickness, and also about the rhythms of the hair. Some of us have very straight beards, others have very curly beards. So I'm going to now pump this up a little bit and make this a more robust beard. Again, I'm just going to pull a few things on the edges there just to break it up. And you can see how that really is now a much fuller beard. And I'll pull it around the mouth here a little bit. What you don't want to do is completely lose the mouth. Okay, so see how that looks like from the front, and I can again make some references to how the clay is, or how the hair is coming out of the skin, and then sometimes I like to soften it a bit. It just doesn't seem too contrived. Okay, this is the segment on facial hair, and I'm going to start with the eyebrow, and I'm going to start with some drawings. Now there's things in the drawings that I can show you that will be harder in the sculpture. It's sort of a trade-off, because in drawing we have black and white, and in sculpture we don't have line, we just have form that reads as shadow. So the way the brows and the hair are handled and formed differently than they are in a drawing. But I can explain in a drawing how the direction of the hair, for instance, the brow goes up. If this is the infraorbital shape, then the brow starts here. The hair grows up in this direction from actually underneath the brow. It grows forward and around, and then it begins to turn this way, and as it comes across, it grows in a horizontal fashion until we get to the arch. And then when we get to the arch, the hair starts to begin to grow down and out. So from the side, that is coming this way and then down, and the hair is usually much thicker right in through here and over to here. And it's kind of interesting because as fashion changes, especially for women, eyebrows change, you know. So back in the 30s we had very thin eyebrows. We're going through a period right now where it's very fashionable to have thick eyebrows. But I think I'm going to also just make a little short mention of the eyelash, because the eyelash in sculpture creates a shadow. And of course in real life it is a dark hair, but we can't make that in sculpture. So what has to happen is we will typically cut a little ridge in the top of the eyelid that creates a shadow. And what that does is it creates a darkness because of the shadow. So the deeper I make that incision, the blacker the shadow is. I think I'll step over now to the clay, and I'm going to start right in here by drawing the hair growing from underneath up and turning, and as I go, in this case from left to right, as I move this way, the hair begins to grow horizontally, and I'm lifting up to the arch, and when I get to the arch, now the hair begins to grow down, and it continues in that direction. And so if I were just to scratch it in, that's the direction of the hair. Now in sculpture we don't want lines, so we have to convert lines into form, so to get that color or the richness. So now what I'm going to do is push in here a bit, and you can see immediately I got a dark shadow. So to the eye, when the eye sees that, it reads it as hair, or as color, and so I can depress here again and enrich that shadow just by making it a little deeper. And then I get rid of some of these lines, and I may have a few lines here and there, or I may even add a tad of clay, especially right in here, because that's the part, typically, especially on a male tend to have thicker eyebrows, and that creates a little more projection. And so I might just indicate a few subtle lines, but then typically what I'll do is I'll go back and subdue them so that they don't seem too raw or too obvious. And if I want to enrich that, especially on a dark brow, I'll tend to go even a little deeper in through here, possibly even undercut, because I want to make it nice and rich. So here this is growing up. Sometimes you'll actually be able to see a little bit of hair growing up this way and then down this way. And so it sort of comes together. And then this is the area where I was telling you about for the eyelash. I'll make an incision here, and that will make that blacker and create a shadow. What painters do is they just paint a shadow right on their sclera, which is the white part of the eye, and over the iris to create that shadow. So typically on a dark-haired person, the darker the hair, the more shadow you're going to need to pull that across. Okay, I think that just about covers the eyebrow. Okay, before I start to add the glasses, I'd like to steal a little quote from Frank Lloyd Wright that I've used a lot, and I think it's appropriate to what we're going to be doing, because when you add glasses to a portrait, if you make them too realistic, they feel like they're too mechanical. And Wright had a quote about his houses. He used to say, a house shouldn't be on the hill, it should be of the hill. And when we're talking about portraits and glasses, the glasses should be of the head and not on the head. And that would also apply to hair. The hair should also feel that it's of the head and not on the head. And I could even extend that down to the clothes and everything that has to do with the figure. So when I add these glasses, it's not going to be like adding a real pair of glasses. That would be the worst thing you could possibly do, would be to actually construct something that looked like an actual, what do they call these, the arms, or the actual construction of the lens holder itself. So I'm going to first mark out where the glasses would be. And you know, there's all kinds of glasses. Some glasses are the kind that don't have the frames, the clear ones that don't make much of a presence. And then of course we have the heavy rim type. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. But this approach basically would apply to all of them. It's just we're going to add a little bit more to something with a heavy rim. So first we're going to place where that glass is going to go. So I'm just going to draw a little line to give myself an idea where I want to place that glass. And here would be where the nose guard is, or the, so I'm simply giving myself a little line so I'm knowing where to add clay to. And I'm just going to start by adding an area above the eye where that rim would be, and I'm going to build right around. I'm going to come right down to that line. And I might put a little piece in there for the holder, because that's something that usually shows unless they're a built-in shape. You might want to look at the statue on Mount Rushmore of Theodore Roosevelt. Borglum did a real nice job on putting the glass monocle on Theodore Roosevelt, and he used this technique. And what I do not want to do is cover the entire eye. I want to let that eye show through, and if it has a frame, then I'll build out a little extension for the frame. And I want to build out here a little bit because I want to feel like there is a frame, and that could go, you know, depending on where you wear your glasses, high or low, or whether they're thin or aviators or whatever. The main thing is, what we're trying to convince people is that this is glass, that there's glass, and that we're looking through the glass at the eye. But we want to get the feeling that we're looking through glass at the eye itself, showing through. So we're trying to get a transparency. So now I'm going to come out and add a little bit to the arm. Okay, so I'm beginning to add the extension that comes out from the glasses, and I could probably almost refer to my own glasses. And if I want to get the feel that these are frameless glasses, then I wouldn't make this edge. I would join that all together and bring it down straight like that, so that there isn't any indication or delineation of a frame. So the more I can get this glass area to look like it's continuous, to get the viewer to believe that this is a glass area, and we're really looking through that and seeing something through it, something behind it. And now it'll help to have the nose piece. If I've covered up too much of the eye, I can always come back and do a little drawing of it to reestablish some of the things that I might have lost. But this part right in through here, for instance, I could indicate a little bit of the lower lid just by drawing a little bit, something like that. And again, that sort of, you see a little bit of the lid through the lens, so to speak. So that can be nice and smooth, and you know, I could go back now if I want to add a frame and get a little shadow on the edge. So this, you can see, isn't really a mechanical contrivance that I've put on. This really belongs to the skull. And so when we first see it, you know, you just assume that this is a pair of glasses because you're seeing the edges of it, and it's enough to make it believable. So what I've done is, instead of putting a mechanical contrivance on the sculpture, I've built the glasses right into the sculpture. So the glasses are really now of the sculpture. They're not on the sculpture. And I'm going to continue to build out here a little bit to get the shadow and the distance. And this really would be a total undercut here, but as long as I get enough shadow underneath.
A little bit.
Watch a little bit on your
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually catching that here.
Yeah, I got it here too.
Okay.
So
I might.
You pick it up from. I have a little undercut here.
Okay, so I'm going to continue to go back all the way to the ear. Okay, so that's basically the effect of a glass. It's not really a pair of glasses, but it creates the effect of glasses, and it creates the effect of transparency, and it's enough of a frame to tell the story without actually building the whole glasses themselves.